Yeah, great. All right, Augustine, why don't you take us away?
Okay, thank you, everyone. So I'm Augustine, he, him, broadcasting from the swampy depths of Miami, Florida, far away from most of you. So today, as part of the design series, we wanted to go over a tool that's known as Heuristic Evaluation. And basically, it's a framework that allows us to standardize assessment of a product or service. And really what it's about is having a method and approach to assessing something quickly with a consistent output. So really, we're going to kind of dive into this, understand what it is, what its benefits are, what its drawbacks are, and how we can apply it to our business. As always, if anyone has any questions as we go along, please interrupt. I'd love for this to be more of a discourse than just me talking to my computer in my room. So how does it work? How do we approach a heuristic evaluation? So step one is who's the participant. This can be sort of right size to be a single person evaluating it or a group of people. And what we do is we sort of have a set of heuristics or rules for good design that we're assessing a product against. So we'll go into a little bit more detail about that on some of the subsequent slides. Step two, each evaluator examines the product, rates it against each of those rules for good design, and it drives a consistent approach to the product in the way that it's assessed. This is a way that we can sort of look at the product across any of those rules and make an assessment of whether it's good or bad. And then third, being able to make any comments. The comments are based on our professional knowledge and best practices in their adherence to any of these heuristics. So as you can sort of tell, you're not doing a ton of deep dive into what problems are, but based on years of knowledge and just what we all know good looks like, you can make an assessment as to what the software is doing. And then as the last step, we have an evaluation that's compiled, analysis that's made with recommendations that are clearly articulated to the client. So what are the benefits? You can have early identification of any problems, potential usability issues that are part of the design process. As I mentioned before, these are based on best practices and professional knowledge that any of the evaluators have. You're able to identify things very early, avoid potential pitfalls that are really apparent to the team. The broad perspective is basically how and who evaluates it. What I really love about this tool is that you can bring people of different backgrounds together to have a consistent output. So in this case, you could have a design researcher, a visual designer, a developer, and a project manager that all come together, provide an evaluation, and there's a synthesis output that happens from that. So you're bringing many different perspectives together in order to provide value to your client quickly. The consistent approach uses the standardized heuristics or rules that we're evaluating against. Instead of just having people's opinions on what the software is, it's driven by a little bit of a methodology and a bit of an approach. And it's cost effective. This is a quicker tool than going fully into user research and having to go through interviews and analysis of metrics and those sort of things. This is something that someone can go in, provide an assessment for, and then come together quite quickly and provide a lot of value to either the beginning of a project or maybe right sizing the way that we engage with a client that is a little bit cash strapped and needs some outcomes, but can't afford all of our wondrous services here at 8th Flight. Keep going through. So the drawbacks. It has limited context and perspective. It doesn't provide quite the shift left or transformation that some of our other design practices can. This is something that's much more surface level. It is a tool that can sort of provide context and point out things that are very apparent, either from a usability or an experience point of view. And also, it sort of gives everyone the ability to not address sort of some of the broader issues and the product's functionality performance. I did a little bit of a deep dive. I've only used this a few times, and I think in the past have all used the Nielsen heuristics as we've gone through. There's actually a couple. So as I was putting this together, I was curious to see what these heuristics were and different ways that you could approach them. And we have a couple of examples of something that Nix Campbell had put together and used for some of their previous clients as a framework. So if we go into here, what you'll see is that there's these 10 items that are listed here under Nielsen heuristics, each have a set of questions underneath that you're rating against. So there's sort of 10 different dimensions that you're thinking of with various line items that are listed underneath each. And obviously, no one could read this. So what we did was we put together an example of a heuristic evaluation for eighthlight.com. So we took the first item, which is the visibility of status, and sort of went through, and honestly, I did this probably in 8 to 10 minutes, where I was able to list out all of the items in the checklist, assess them whether they passed or not, and then provided any comments that could be improvements or reasons why we might not want to worry about certain things. And you can imagine that as I did this over, the 10 different topics, this would maybe take me an hour to put together at most, where I'm able to go through the site, make sort of an assessment against any of these items, and then come back with a synthesis that is valuable to any of our clients. I'm going to back up 1 minute to this. Oops.
Sorry, I don't know what happened. Let me figure out what I did. So sorry, Augustine.
No, it's okay. It's probably my fault.
No, I think it was me. Are we seeing the right thing?
Yes.
Perfect.
So going back to this, how can Eighthlight take advantage of it? I think that the framework enables different evaluators to come together, and there's a lot of value in that for any of our clients. It offers something that's easy to understand for any of the clients, and we know what we're getting ourselves into. Because it's quick and the output is consistent, it's something that you can quickly generate either at the beginning of the design process, or even without design's involvement, as sort of a framework that can be used for any project. And because the deliverables are flexible, you can right size it, so you can either have a whole team do it, or you can just have one person that is driving the deliverable for the client. So it could just be one designer that puts this together as, their expert thoughts around a product at the beginning of a project, or it can be more involved. Any questions so far? Okay. So this is an example of part of the deliverable. So what we would do is we'd go through, sort of fill out the sheet, and then what we found is valuable is putting together a screenshot so that it's more visual, it's easier for the client to understand, and you're calling out certain parts from the previous slide. So if we go through here, if I go back, you'll notice that lines 1.4 and 1.5. So we're talking about selecting multiple options and clearly identifying what page you're on. So you'll notice that there's highlights that are called out for where the page title is in the section, and the visibility of different filters being applied. And this is in the insight section when we're using a filter. So it's just really easy to understand. You can imagine that this would be part of a presentation. You have a couple of tables that have synthesis of all the different comments, and then a set of screenshots that are annotated like this that can really drive and show a client where there's problem areas with their current software experience. And where I think it's really interesting is like, what's the impact? The client impact is driving something that they understand, that can drive some A/B testing, addressing limitations. It also can help to set the tone for the beginning of a project or during business development. So if you're trying to build trust with your client, if you're trying to have them sort of buy into how to collaborate and the sort of tone that 8th Light wants to put forward as the client's being onboarded to a project, this is a really nice way to have something that is quick and easy to understand that builds a little bit of that trust. So closing thoughts. Heuristic evaluation is an inspection method that has controlled input and output. Its best use is really identification of surface level problems, understanding sort of at a glance where software is at, but it doesn't allow for you to do deep dives or big transformations around a software. And its impact can be seen really around the beginning of a project or during business development. Any questions?
Yeah, Augustine, Rich has a question. Rich, do you want to just read it out, or I can read it for you? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, it's just curiosity. I saw 4 different heuristic models thrown up briefly, and that raises the question, how do you pick one, right? Like what, there's presumably some pros and cons to each of those. What context does somebody consider when deciding how to best apply the approach?
Yeah, Mary has a really good answer. She's saying that the Nielsen heuristics that we used is really the sort of golden standard. I threw those up just because I thought it was interesting, because I was being a nerd and doing a little bit of research around, are there other heuristic models? The team has not done any vetting of the other ones. So, at first glance, I'm sure that they all have their pros and cons. But as a standardized model, I think we would probably just sort of go with the Nielsen one.
Cool, thanks.
Okay, well, if anyone has any questions, any of us from the design team are willing and would love to chat more about anything. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to stop recording.